Welcome to Auditory Osmosis, episode 11. This is your hosts, Nick Ritter and Mr. Ether Hawkins. How are you today, sir?
Oh, what?
Ah!
Oh,
What's
sorry.
up?
I fell asleep from that music. That intro music was really soothing.
It was pretty nice. Should we do in like the public radio voices for a little bit?
Yeah, I think so. I think we gotta break it down a little bit and maybe reestablish where we are in the geopolitical scene. We have the Brexit vote, the referendum in.
It's
And
in.
last podcast I was talking about that. I was like 2016 is going to be crazy. It's going to be off the wall, man. And I was following that Brexit vote for probably since 2015 when they were talking about leaving the EU, and all the way up until the actual vote, the polls said 49-51.
Yeah,
51 against leaving, 49 for leaving. So I was pleasantly surprised because at the end of the day, what that vote is it's all about nationalism versus internationalism. No matter how the media wants to spin it, that's what it boils down to. So, that happened since we've been off air.
That has happened.
What did you think about it?
I don't. A lot of people. Well, the thing is, a lot of people don't understand what's going on. I don't understand it fully, but I understand most of the details, I guess you'd say.
You're not alone, because Google released, and like Washington Post and other news outlets, they covered this little datum point. People hours after the vote to leave the EU, people in Britain, one of the most searched string of words had been, "What is the EU?" So, a lot of people, they're totally out of the loop of what's going on domestically, internationally, etc. So
Right.
you're not alone in that respect.
Well, I understand. I know what the EU is, and I understand like why it's what a lot of the politics, or a lot of the, I guess you'd say, the money exchanges and what's going on with the EU being the EU and who is all involved in the EU.
Right. And the bureaucrats, the bureaucratic regime of the European Union,
Right.
they tend to receive a lot of lobbying interests, or they're solicited by these transnational corporations and these international entities that want to influence the domestic life of a country without going through the domestic bureaucracy.
Right.
They'd rather go through these bureaucrats.
They don't care how the money gets there. They just want the money.
Right. And they want the least resistance, the path of least resistance. So when you throw a bunch of countries into an economic union, it's easier to lobby and secure favorable positions domestically, because the countries have to follow what the bureaucrats say.
It's like a weird insurance ploy, isn't it?
Well, and what's funny is, while this is going on, the Trans-Pacific Partnership happened, and it was completely like done in secret. And the American people, and that's just it. Are we going to have a referendum to leave that It's a little different than the European Union, and then you have, because the markets, they're based on speculation, right? Mm-hmm. So Wall Street was faltering a bit, and they said, hey, and markets across the world were treating this decision kind of inappropriately, because
definitely
they should respect the people who voted to leave this European Union. Britain we should respect their wishes. The people, if we want to democratize any kind of government, we should listen to the people when they cast a vote.
Right.
And when I saw Wall Street stumble and other markets tumble, I saw them say, hey, you guys have to leave the EU as quickly as possible so we don't have to speculate a year or two from now. They wanted, to the benefit of their trading, because they like bull markets, not bear markets, they like to have, reasonable estimates to when Britain will actually leave the EU and have the ripple effect kind of hit everybody, even across the pond. The Americans, we kind of felt it. The Dow Jones, I believe, took a little tumble.
Right. Well, didn't the euro was like the biggest drop in the euro in like I don't know how long.
Well,
In one day, I guess you'd say.
like I said last podcast, Greece still recovering. Brazil is on the brink of social catastrophe. Venezuela is completely collapsed. So you have a trend of these countries defaulting, or they can't pay their debt. And you wouldn't want to be attached to your neighbor's debt. But with the EU, there's a chance that you would have to pay for somebody else's debt, because Britain, being a member of that conglomerate called the European Union, would have to pick up the bill for any of its other member nations.
Right. Well, every member of the EU, like, they pay a certain amount of money. I don't know if it's monthly or yearly or whatever.
Your rent's due.
Yeah, your rent. Basically, that's why I'm saying it's like insurance. So you pay a certain amount in insurance, and a lot of it goes to the EU, but then some of it actually gets spread out between the different countries that are in this EU or this democracy, or I don't know. It's I guess that's a little different, but every member of this insurance company, we'll say, gets a little shift here and there, or a little, not, I don't want to say bonus, or we'll say help.
Yeah, and scratch somebody's back and they'll scratch yours, but
exactly. But that's where all the lobbying and all the big money actually comes in.
Well, and it's funny because the politicians who really were pushing for them to stay, like David Cameron and the reliable characters that always want to change or sway the public opinion, they were very upset. And they even went to the level of saying, if you leave the European Union, you are going to be more vulnerable to terrorism and other threats, which is kind of ridiculous, because I don't believe the EU has anything to do with the NATO alliance. That's the military agreement. The EU is an economic agreement. So the level of fear mongering.
Well, there's still military involved in the EU.
But the point is NATO and the UN, they're the dominant peacekeeping forces when it comes to the allies. And the EU, I believe, has nothing to do with that security force.
Well,
maybe economically it funds some of its services.
Yeah, well, it funds different militaries, like I was saying, with that money paid out. It funds all different things.
And China really played their hand. Russia was indifferent and actually just kind of glad that Britain left the EU, because the EU has been able to really pull. It has a lot of weight when it says we're going to sanction you, Russia. It's several nations,
Mm-hmm.
And Russia now can deal with Britain individually when it comes to trading.
Yeah.
So they were slightly happy, but China really played their hand, because even the Chinese nationalists, who are actually capitalist, crony capitalists, because as you will see, they were frustrated with Britain's decision. Now, why would a Chinese nationalist be frustrated? Because they are participating in the crony capitalism of the West. And they get investments from the European trade groups and vice versa. Plus, the international entities, once again, the transnational corporations, they have a lot of stake in all those countries. Mm-hmm. So if you can group them, it's easier to manage them. And I think that's what this whole thing, this whole vote referendum boils down to. nationalism versus internationalism.
Yeah.
And the media is clearly on the side of internationalism, but that's their prerogative.
Right. But that's where they get their money from too.
But yeah, I thought we'd just touch on some of the changes that occurred over the days we were absent from the air.
Don't be scared to do a little research, people. It doesn't take long. You can do a little reading or a lot of reading. Just learn a little bit. See what's going on around you.
Very correct, hon.
Anyway, so I just wanted you to know I opened up a San Pellegrino. It is a pomegranate and blood orange, or Arancia orange. It's
blood orange.
It's pretty good.
I'm just chowing down on a double chocolate chip cookie that you
eating my cookies? That's good because I don't eat them. We all know that. I don't eat sugar, so
I can't stand sugar, but man, I'm addicted to sugar. This is delicious. Fantastic job on the cookies.
Just don't put the crumbs on that. Yeah, right there. Just wipe them off. Thanks. That's a pretty good cookie. I heard from some people today.
We'll have to take turns here in studio doing sweep jobs because from all the chips and I see you spilt a little beer there over in that corner. But
that was the other night when I was, probably shouldn't have been drinking any more beer.
But yeah, I mean, eventually we're gonna have to clean up the studio a bit. But yeah, the cookies, food, man. It amazes me all the different things you can do with food. And remember how we were talking,
nourish your body?
The energy,
Ooh.
Let me clear my palate with a little bit of green tea. It's magic. At the end of the day, food is magic. And last podcast I said we should focus in on a theme, a discussion topic.
Yep.
So why not today, for the rest of the podcast, cover and discuss what is food?
All right.
And all of its little,
some intricacies,
extensions.
Yeah.
Exactly, the intricacies of food. So
where do you want to start? Do you want to start from the ground, or do you want to start in the body, digestion, or do you want to start
I want to start in the ground. I want to just make a little note that if it wasn't for our adaptation to, the transition from going hunting and gathering food to planting crops, agriculture is the ultimate energy source for civilization. Well, we need agriculture and the domestication of animals to even have a functioning society.
Definitely.
It's like the very first service environment. So I think that's when food actually started to take off. But then there's a different side I wanted to cover. Who had been from an anthropological state? Anthropological.
Break that word down for people.
Just, anthropology, the study of the human species and its transitions through the evolution of our species. Who had been the very first group of people to start cooking with fire, or even mixing ingredients? You always think about, don't eat that, that's spicy. Don't eat that, that's poisonous. Who found that out? I mean, it's a philosophical dilemma. It's like the chicken and the egg. But
actually, well, they say there's a lot of actual
evidence.
There's some evidence, but they actually say this is how our brains got the size that it did. And when the monkeys started coming down from trees, they started foraging. And what they found, supposedly, was the mushrooms. I don't know if we've talked about this. This is just one theory. But I think foraging was definitely, a caveman thing. Like I always say, you had to be the best caveman you could be. You had to have fire, and you cook for all the people and make them happy. But you got to know how to make fire, and you got to know how to cook. And without food, nobody gets anywhere.
Yeah, so you think the very first priest of a tribe was also the chef?
I think that's who the people,
Do
you
you think the
know,
chef was a priest at
I
one
th-
point?
I think honestly at first I think it may have been like whoever started the fire was the cook, but the people still gathered the food. You know what I mean?
Right.
Maybe the chef at that point in time was person gathering the food also because he knew how to make the fire and he knew how to get the food and he also knew how to cook it.
Well, and we know, and I'm talking about after this point, we know that in the beginning, we actually would just eat our meals raw. We wouldn't cook any of the hunt. The
Well, yeah, it's because it took too long.
Exactly. And the way our teeth have formed, they evolved according to ripping and tearing, kind of like a canine tooth.
And yeah, well, that I guess that's probably where they started, but they were grinding in the back, the molars, and
Hmm.
then the fronts for cutting and ripping, you know.
Right, right. And who decided to, like, okay, the main component of food gathering its own magic tends to be the taste, the sensation of flavor. Who developed the first palate? Because I think that's where food starts. Otherwise, food is just sustenance and it has no art to it. But when did food begin to be more than just energy? When did food when did we designate it as an art, and when did it become a technique to obtain flavor, to excite the human taste bud?
I think once they started putting recipes on paper, you could start serving people the same thing over and over. So not necessarily one day after another, but you could serve them that same thing 2 weeks later, and they'd just it would bring them back, or it would, you know what I mean. But I think the paper route, or like putting it, writing it down.
So, do you think recipes had been stored in the mind and passed down like an heirloom through spoken word, and then eventually we started writing and actually recording our recipes? Like recipes had to have began just through word of mouth.
Right. Well, definitely word of mouth, but over time they probably had to. It was probably the son of the guy we were talking about earlier. You know what I mean?
Right.
The caveman, the one that could make fire and catch the food and cook the food.
Compounding ideas through generations.
Right.
And you
It's
know,
it's a certain type of person, probably especially back then, that would do all that. You know.
well, and some foods have clear indication, like they have indicators that kind of tell their story. Like we know somebody left a grape out underneath the sun for too long, and that gave us,
Oh, I guess you'd say fermentation or wine.
well, I'm saying that
Oh, I'm
seems like a
sorry, raisins.
natural,
Sorry, that was too
yeah,
far. Raisins.
I'm
Too.
saying that seems like a natural accident that occurred, and we stumbled upon the raisin, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like when you look at a raisin, you kind of can think and paint an image in your head, the history of how we discovered the raisin. It
Right.
had to have been by accident. But then you have other things that yes, it could have been an accident, but some of the stuff is too intricate. Like, how did we start before chemistry and when alchemy was something, brewing things? And when did we start messing with chemicals to enhance flavor? Like, that's once again
It's all.
developing the palate.
Honestly, it's all about when the brain grew from the Neanderthal size to the size it is now. Like what we have to bridge that gap. We have to figure out what happened between that time. And some more information to back up the mushroom theory is mushrooms are the only thing known that actually rebuilds brain cells.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that makes sense. And, you get further down the line of people taste testing, um, learning from their ancestors, writing recipes. And then you get to this point where cooking as an art is a craft, except for it's funny. I mean, nowadays the comedian and the chef are acceptable artisans, right? They have a craft, and we give them uh, public platforms.
Hmm.
But back in, let's say, the medieval times, before the Enlightenment, let's say, the chef and the cook had been almost slave-like characters.
The chef and the comedian.
Oh yes, excuse me. The chef and the comedian had been almost slave-like a court gesture and a chef. They were slaves essentially for the nobility.
Right.
And when do you think we broke out of that? Like when did the chef gain his sovereignty as an individual and an artisan?
Well, I think he was even as that. I guess you'd say
That's
like you
that's
say.
why France, right? France was the beginning of real culinary tradition, correct?
Yes. Well, okay. Some may say it's China, but France definitely.
So did the chef rise out of serfdom in France first?
I think so. Again, it was all about like the actual written recipes. And again, some say that Chinese had it before the French, but the French apparently made the books and the recipe known, that kind of thing.
Right, and tea, and we know they recently discovered a brewery through some archaeological dig in China. So the Chinese were culturally advanced.
Absolutely.
I always think of cooking as just an extension of the culture. It's one of the arts.
Yeah, and it's different everywhere you go. Not the techniques necessarily, but the flavors, the foods, the likes and dislikes.
The styles.
Right.
It's like
The
painting.
cuisine.
Yes, it reflects the local culture.
Hmm.
And it's kind of strange that France always comes to mind when it comes to the culinary tradition, because you would think that culinary tradition would have maybe came about during the antiquities, perhaps even during the reign of the Greco-Roman republics.
I think back then it was all about just meat and sustenance. That wasn't necessarily. I mean, yeah, they had probably good food where they had that good cook that they knew about, but it was really about feeding your warriors and your people. The best ones were the peasants. They got the crap food, and they just had to put as much love as they could into it, and they had the best food, man.
Well, and we know that grains were, bread, milk, water,
Hmm.
the staples of the peasants' diet. So they didn't really have restaurants, and they didn't have any outlet to explore flavors. So yeah, it was all about energy then. And today, you can join the military, and there's a small percentage of soldiers who spend most of their time just cooking meals for other soldiers.
Yeah.
So that process still exists because people have to eat.
People have to eat. That's the key.
But then I feel like when we became industrialized nations, we had all this mechanization of agriculture, and it produced an abundance of ingredients. And I think the contemporary situation of restaurants on every corner, that started after we industrialized ourselves, because we really didn't have an abundance of ingredients to allow people to have restaurants that were open 7 days a week, let alone 24 hours, if you think about that.
Yeah.
When did that start? When did the culinary tradition spawn a business model to, once again, it's the tradition of, or the art of cooking. It goes from basic needs to slowly progressing to becoming more and more sovereign art. And it was more and more about freeing oneself through the trade. And
Right.
nowadays, we have celebrity culture for chefs. And that is very, very new. Celebrity chef culture, I would say that is about 50 years old at the most.
Actually, the celebrity chef started because of a certain lawyer or a certain not lawyer. Maybe he was a lawyer also, agent, we'll say, and it was the same agent as well, we'll just say it was Ermo Lagasse, but it was the way that they marketed him on every street corner, every commercial, and bam, he got his his catchphrase, and but he had the supermensch behind him, and it's all about marketing. But that's where it started with. I guess it didn't really start.
So you think
That's the new age. I guess the old age would be Jacques Pepin and what's her name? I can't think of her name right now. The old,
did the celebrity culture coincide with the invention of modern advertising? Did
well,
it come
a lot of the times, I feel like the celebrity is still about a character. So
right? But I mean, if you follow the story of the chef, he was a serf in a dungeon, and now he has multiple restaurants, and he or she appears on television, and they've become, you know, youth idols. People think, I want to be a football star, I want to be this. Well, now kids actually go, I want to be Gordon Ramsay.
yeah,
I mean, a small percentage of kids do this. I'm just saying it's amazing that the idea of a celebrity chef or a chef being a role model in our society even emerged. Because if you look at the history of the cook, he was a slave or somebody who provided energy for the real men of the culture. You know what I mean?
started at the bottom, now we're here.
Exactly.
Start at the bottom, now my whole crew up in here.
And I feel like if it wasn't for modern advertising and the mechanization of agriculture, the chef, or what we know today as the chef, would not exist.
There'd definitely still be a chef.
I mean, the celebrity chef.
I think it would still be there. This media hype that we have now. But the thing is, it's because you're saying if there wasn't, well, genetically modified stuff, if we couldn't all eat all the time just to be, there wouldn't be near as many chefs, we'll say.
But even the food that a chef provides, like without the actual, how do I put it? Without the focus on his personality. Like, I feel like we never focused on the chef before the electric age, before advertising. We, like, if there was a good chef, the nobility and the wealthy would seek his food, not his name. They wouldn't care about the chef at all. They only looked at the product he provided. And now we're obsessed with his product, and we're also obsessed with him.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yep.
So it just amazes me, like, if you think about how free the chef is today.
Well, a lot of the times it's the vision of being free.
Right.
Especially when you're in the industry.
Yeah, and in some ways, they are underpaid. You don't hear of a union for cooks in general.
In some companies, but
what's up with that, Mr. Ritter? Why do cooks always get the short end of the stick? Like, nobody's unionizing the kitchen.
There's unions right in Minnesota. There's companies that people work for in the restaurant we used to work together in, that are in a restaurant that actually is their second job, or their first job rather, that is union.
And you have to rise above a certain level of food to say that you're a skill-based worker, right?
Yes.
And that's why the wages are always so low at the entry level, because there's arguably no skill involved.
And you're automatically playing with money all the time too.
and you're on the assembly line. But then once you become an artisan and you have a skill, then you kind of like, what's your opinion on the break between the low wages in the cooking industry and the higher wages? Like, when do you actually break through that ceiling of, I am a cook, a professional cook, and then you have the, I'm just getting by cooking?
Um, it's your mindset, to be honest. It's where you want to be, just like in culinary school. It's what you want to get out of it. But if you're hardcore at it, you can break out in 10 years probably of actually being in the business.
But objectively, not subjectively, what defines the professional cook?
I don't know. There's a lot. I mean, I've learned that management's a huge thing. But
Get into that. Get into the fact that when you're crafting a dish, not only are you thinking about the components and assembling it and the presentation and the delivery, but you're also trying to be as efficient as possible, right?
all
Like a
right, so
professional
let
chef.
me put it out this way. I'll just interrupt. So when I'm making, we'll just say a certain, let's say a pan fried walleye, okay? So I know how long it takes to bread that fish, and I know how long it takes to have to flip that fish. But while that fish is cooking in the pan, I know it takes exactly that long to before I flip it to do the two things to get the components for the dish. So as soon as I get those components, I turn around, I get to flip the pan, throw the pan in the oven, then go back to the other components or the other plates that I had to do. It's a really weird tightrope game because again, you're playing with money, which is product, which is something that you can't just throw away. So it has to be as close to perfect as you can get it every time, right?
Yeah.
So that's only one dish, and but if there's a table of 10 people and they all have all these dishes, my job or a lot of when you can break through and get from just making it to being able to do it is you see all those 10 or 14 or however many dishes cooking, and you have 52 components that you have to get ready for those, we'll say 14 people or whatever. But you have to know exactly where everything's going and how long it's going to take. Again, time management. But you start to get in the rhythms and you start to know, like I was saying, how long something takes. And then that's how long something else takes. So you can do those both at the same time while other things are going a little bit longer. Does that make any sense?
Yeah, and breaking down efficiency. What do you think the effect, like, okay, the machine, the tyranny of the machine, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
People at low entry positions for cooking may know the ticket machine,
Mm-hmm.
right? It prints, right?
The
And that
printer.
sound will haunt you in your sleep
It's
if
true.
you let it. And there's a tyranny going on because it's you versus the world, theoretically. There's a curtain in most cases. There's a curtain and a barrier between you and your audience, but you have to perform, and the demand is sometimes tyrannical.
All right.
And there's the pressure and the stress. And what do you think before the ticket machine, before all of the appliances that we have, like a Robocoup, something that grinds and does the work for you? It speeds up process, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you think the restaurant business was easier or harder before you had electric mixers, electric choppers, machines to aid you? But then the paradox, it makes your job easier, but then you also can meet a higher demand. So you actually go right back to this balance between the supply and the demand and the chef's task of being efficient and
So
supplying the demand. So what I'm getting at is, was it easier before the machine, or because the ticket machine exists and because the ticket machine balances the speed up a process. So at the end of the day, it's just as hard or just as easy as it was before.
It's probably the latter. It's probably the fact that you have the electricity and you have all these other ways of doing things to help speed up other processes doesn't mean that you can speed up the main process. You know what I mean? It's just faster to get to a certain point, but then in food, when you get to a certain point, you have to stop because then you have to make it how they want it.
Well, and let me break that convoluted question down a little bit. Let's say I'm a customer.
Okay. Yep.
And I go into a restaurant that does not use electric appliances. So the waitress comes up to me and she hand writes my ticket. Then she goes and delivers it to the window to the cook. The cook puts the ticket up, starts making it, no electric machines. See, now that's a different time and space relationship than I come into a restaurant as a customer. The lady rings up my order, instantly prints a ticket to the back room without going back to give that ticket. And the cook is now bombarded by more tickets, correct?
Right. But I know
handled.
I see what you're saying. So so you're saying the fact that the computer can send it back faster, but the fact that okay, hang on, let me break it down again. I know what you're saying. I do. I understand it. Let me try to put it out on paper. Do they equal out?
Yeah.
The fact that you have all this invention and technology, does that equal out the fact that back then there was no technology? So, yes.
Okay. So the workload was less, but the work that you had was harder. So
right.
It's the same balance because the machine makes work easier, but then your workload increases because the machine makes work easier.
But again, with the more technology and the faster we keep growing in technology, the faster we keep growing as a species or as a human. So the only reason it's necessity at this point. So that's why we went to all these faster ways is because we're feeding more people.
Right. And do you think it was an easier task before or after?
Well, I would say after. Before, there's no way that I don't know. The pay is different, so it's hard.
People wouldn't demand as much though before because it would take you so long. Like you could never do multiple parties with 100+ people. It wouldn't be feasible before the machine. So the cooks were doing less work, but the work that they were doing was maybe 10 times harder because they didn't have the machines to speed up process.
Yeah.
And I don't know which side of that technological progression I would want to be on. Would I want to be the cook who had to do everything by hand, or would I want to be the cook who has a machine to help, but I'm doing 10 times the workload?
I'd rather be where I am now.
So you prefer the mechanized world or the mechanized kitchen?
I do.
And going further into the mechanization of the process of cooking, do you think the gastro food scene, gastronomy, gastronomy, that whole scene of taking an ingredient and breaking it down to its chemical flavor,
molecular gastronomy?
Yes, exactly. Do you think we're going to have fridges one day that 3D print, so to speak, real time, like burgers and food? Like, do you think that's the ultimate, end goal of the mechanization of the kitchen?
Well, it's like the Jetsons. They go to that machine and it prints out their food and it's done. Like, you close the door, pick what you want to eat, and then open the door and your food's ready.
And what I foresee is I think the chefs that have a vision and have a goal with their food and they rise above the rest of the industry, they will patent recipes, and then you will have to purchase recipes for your molecular gastronomical printer, and it will print these recipes and it will make the food for you, and you will buy like little applications, recipes from the top chefs of the world through the internet.
Yeah, it's
And
the ultimate sellout.
in restaurants will be mechanized, so you will go to, for instance, if you had patent recipes, I would go to the Ritterwurst, whatever the hell you name your restaurant, and you wouldn't be there, but I could still get your food the way you would make it by ordering it at your restaurant, but there will be zero human interaction. It will be printed through a machine. But then on the other end of the spectrum,
and this is where I'd like to be.
The other end of the spectrum, you will still have a minority of people who want to pay more for real human service because
the guy
they want to be going back to the roots, because when you push something to its limit, it tends to reverse its effect. So people, when pushed to that kind of mechanization, will want to go backwards. And like we see with people doing whole food and farmers markets, people will be willing to pay the extra buck to have humans prepare their food.
Yep, for sure.
And you will have a whole different culinary scene, because you will have the sellout chefs with
it'll be like the speakeasies of back then. You know what I mean?
And they'll have partnerships with the Silicon Valley types. They'll be selling their recipes, and these machines will print out the food. Meanwhile, you will have organic, human prepared food, and that restaurant will cost more, but the Mickey D's of tomorrow will print everything, and there will be zero human interaction with your drive-through or whatever you do to get your food.
It's the complete polar opposites.
So it's funny because eventually the culinary art of cooking will push the human out of it.
Oh yeah. Well, I think that's one of the first things we're trying to do, or biggest things we're trying to do now, is like 3D print food. We've got it. We've got people that have, you can definitely do it with chocolate and certain proteins, but I think that's the first wave. People being able to print their own food at home.
Yeah, and I think I'm going to be on the same end of the spectrum as you, like growing food and preparing it myself.
Right.
And just locally sourcing my own fridge worth of ingredients.
Exactly. I mean,
so
a couple guys with farms, like pig farms and meat farms, and then you get, you can grow your own food in your garden, and then you get other things you can't grow on your land. You just know a couple other farmers,
Do you think regulation agencies will ever get to the point, if they receive donations by these corporations that make these food printers, will they start regulating to the point where they will not allow humans to prepare food?
I think a lot of that regulation is going to be bullshit soon.
Well, I think that regulation is already here to some degree. They say you got to wear gloves. You have health inspectors who, some of them, they've never even been in a kitchen, but they're inspecting a kitchen. They've never worked in it. They don't understand it, but yet they're assigned to regulate it.
Right. But if it gets to it, you can actually take them to court, and most of the time they lose because they don't even know what the fuck they're talking about.
And do you think the FDA and different institutions like that will eventually try to go full, make human preparation a banned way of cooking?
No, I think the machines will be outlawed before the human will.
Really?
Yep.
Well, and we could go into different discussions.
That goes real deep.
Let's just stick with food today.
Yep.
That's the future. But right now, there's so many things going on, and I can't wait. Like, if you pay attention to the stocks of like McDonald's over the last few years, you see a trend of people doing what you're getting at. They're going back to the wholesome, locally sourced food,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well,
we now,
they're finding out what they've been putting in their bodies for so long, and understanding that you have to, you again, like we said, the sustenance, the nutrition. You are what you eat. Everything you put in your body has some sort of, or it has a reaction, or it has it does something to your body.
right, the chain of ecology, even the thing you're eating, it's good to know what it is eating.
Mm-hmm. I
Um,
mean, that's crazy. Doesn't it get crazy if you think about it like that too?
oh, really crazy. Like, I could feed, for instance, my hens different peppers, and it will slowly change the flavor of the eggs.
Huh? Yeah.
You can do that. Like, the ecology of flavor, amazing.
Well,
Like,
like
it's a chain. It's like a transmutation process,
I knew a pig farm in Texas that they only fed them walnuts and pecans and like really oily nuts.
and
And
it changes
oh,
things.
there was some of the best pork I'd ever had.
And do you think eventually, because like Monsanto, they lobby to keep labels like GMO labels off of our ingredient listings.
Mm-hmm.
They don't want us to be labeling the GMO products because 90% of soy and rice and grain is now genetically modified.
Dude, I mean, almost everything we eat is genetically modified in some sort of way. Okay. It's still technically organic because it's grown from the ground, but people don't know what the actually organic certification means either.
Yeah, and you should cover that, but I also want to say there's a distinct difference between selectively breeding for flavor and lab genetically modifying an organism in the lab. That's
Absolutely.
different. I mean, you can
But
get
one is just to eat and one is for eating.
yeah, exactly, and they're both genetically modified organisms,
Right.
except for one is through it's working with the ecology,
Right. Well,
and
that
one
and
is
that
programming ecology.
right. Well, a lot of the times, like we'll just go with grapes, okay? When they tried to bring grapes across from France or across, from Europe, the grapes wouldn't grow here, so we had to modify them genetically. Actually, we did a crossbreed, which is still technically genetically modifying something when you crossbreed anything, because its genes are splicing together or coming together to make a different organism, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of people don't understand this. So a lot of the peppers or a lot of the asparagus or a lot of that kind of stuff, it's been changed. A lot of the wheat that we eat today is all been changed in order to get more wheat production out of that plant than there was previously.
The bread and circus must go on.
It's crazy. A lot of things we don't even know of being genetically modified have been genetically modified. So if Monsanto had to label all the shit that everything they have is genetically modified, that's what Monsanto does.
Do you think they've lost track with all the cross pollination and all the changes and stuff that's been let loose in the wild? Do you think we've lost track of what is genetically modified and what isn't?
I
Because
think I
have
think
you heard about local farmers being
yeah.
sued by Monsanto when their genetically modified crops appear in the local farmer's garden?
Yeah, but what if they let that farmer go onto their land and their um plants have been genetically modified into the other ones?
Well, it's funny because they want to buy up the local farmers, right? They want to
Right.
contract them, subsidize them and shit.
Mm-hmm.
But then if they do not cooperate, sometimes their crops will end up in their garden and they'll sue them for like copyright stuff and whatnot.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah, it's really evil,
But
honestly.
the thing is if you follow Monsanto's plants for like 2 years, they probably genetically crossbreed anyway. So it's not, the thing is they can't keep track of one specific plant because it'll get modified over a 2-year span, and they don't have the patent on that one anymore.
And you know, I don't think cross pollination has anything to do with it. I don't know why I said that, but the point
No, I mean, it does. It kind of does. If that's how plants keep going, as they pollinate, or that's flowers necessarily, but some even when birds get into one field and then bring a seed from one field into the next field because they landed there, that plant can grow there. You know what I mean?
It's like the problem of with globalization, we have invasive species, right? You hear of lakes having a abundance of invasive species that basically disturb the chain of command when it comes to ecology, and it can shut down ecological systems and force the like carrying capacities to shift and everything. The point is do you think we refuse to label, not only because of the lobbying from Monsanto, but do you think we refuse to label because we honestly have lost track of what is and isn't genetically modified? And let me clarify something. I don't really have a problem. I mean, I do fundamentally, but I get the fact that we need genetically modified organisms. But the real problem with me, with the consumption and not labeling, is for years Monsanto had exclusive patents on Roundup, and they genetically modified their seeds to only be compatible with their chemical agents. So when we talk about you are what you eat, was it glyphosate? The stuff in the Roundup is inside of the nutrient structure.
Right. They put it in the gene, so when you spray that weed killer into your fields, it doesn't kill that plant because it's immune to it because it's already in its genes.
And then you hear about studies with rats having.
I'm sorry, I have to interrupt. I have a cold this evening, and so if I'm sniffling or if I sound a little stuffy, I apologize.
He's a little bit under the weather.
I'm in a complete biohazard suit because I refuse to catch this while I'm in studio.
He's literally recording, and it's all yellow. He's got one of those weird plastic face masks and a breathing apparatus.
I just modified a beekeeper suit, except for I bought some Israeli surplus gas masks.
You stole a hazmat suit. Just be honest.
Okay.
You know, nobody's gonna know where you stole it from,
and I'm not gonna necessarily.
You're borrowing it though, right? You'll bring it back.
I'm bringing it back once
he's borrowing it. So I apologize. I'm sorry. I have a day off on a couple days, so that'll be great.
But that's just it. The Roundup, the studies that come out with like mice and stuff increase cancer rates, right? Because this Roundup is like a carcinogen, and nobody wants to talk about that. And now that the patent's up, other companies are starting to make Roundup, the knockoff brand. So it's in abundance now because it's open, it's let loose on the market. Anybody can make this. And then if we lose control or track of the genetically modified organisms, will we get this Frankenstein resistant strain of whatever that doesn't respond to normal gardening techniques, so to speak?
I don't know.
I don't get Frankenfood.
I think if
you know how they have super bugs, like genetically they modify bugs, and then we find out that they're either resistant or less resistant to something, and then
you mean Monsanto made Zika virus? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I'm not going to get into that this episode.
Sorry, too much, too far.
But this, like food, it becomes less resistant to certain things or more resistant to something. Like, what if we have an antibiotic crisis, because of a genetically modified organism?
Right.
People are not prepared for this kind of circumstance. FEMA is an emergency center for natural disasters, not agricultural collapse.
I think you really should get to know where your food comes from, and always wash your food before when you get it, because most of the time when you buy food from the store, when they're paying people to collect food in the fields, they're not paying them to use the restroom. So always wash your food, fruits,
Right.
vegetables, all that.
I really appreciate the fruit banana because I love how it has its own shell. Any fruit or vegetable or anything, any food that has its own shell, I'm totally down with because, it has that extra barrier between whatever's going on at the farm
Yep. Do
and your
you know
actual nutrition.
like 90% of people open their bananas wrong?
Yeah, I've heard about this, and it's
Yeah.
much easier from the other way.
Yeah, like the chimps or the apes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and a lot of people cite that as, you think we got big IQs? We don't even know how to open bananas.
Yeah, well, we think it's easier because we can get more grip with our opposable thumb. Ha.
That too. And and it's just funny that like stuff coming from Mexico, we always hear of salmonella and stuff.
hmm
It's it's kind of gross to think how far some of your food has traveled. You ever think about that being in the kitchen?
Absolutely.
I mean, it's a gift, but at the same time, you think about like, man, we could do better.
Yeah, you have to. It's again. This is why we can get the same food year round. It's because we found ways of doing it.
Like, for instance, I cut off all the skin on my strawberries nowadays. I just straight up do not trust the year round strawberries, where they're sourced from and how many chemicals are being attached to the skin of that strawberry.
Well,
And back,
you have to realize it's sucking them in too. So,
oh, of course, of course. At least the surface, I can get rid of that, because back when I owned a rat and I would feed them a strawberry, they were very compatible with the human diet, except for they could not throw up. So, like, if you fed them something wrong, they could potentially die or choke or poison themselves because they had no regurgitation reflex.
right.
They would always gnaw off the strawberry's outer skin.
Really?
One factor is the rat could not digest certain skins of fruits as well as humans. But at the same time, their senses are extraordinary, and certain fruits, like if I gave it a strawberry from somewhere exotic, it would eat around it. But then if I gave it a strawberry that we got during our growing season, it would just eat all of it. Something about the outside of the industrial strawberry was not appetizing to even the rat.
Even after you wash it really well?
Even after you wash it. And have you ever tasted the difference? It has something about a industrialized strawberry or industrialized fruit. It has almost this like acidic quality that doesn't seem natural. The sweetness is sometimes lost if you have one of those giant gross strawberries compared to a regular sized, locally grown, compatible with the growing season strawberry.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely understand the different flavor profiles of that. The local ones are so much better and so much
so sweet and delicate,
so much more consistent. And, they tend to be they're the best ones, but you can only get them certain times of the year, of course.
Right, and like blueberries, totally different. A lot of fruits just have different, like you say, flavor profiles.
Yeah, for sure. It takes time for them to develop the sugars and the way that the fruit actually grows, the molecular structure of the fruit.
Yeah, and getting into like a vegetable here, asparagus. Asparagus is incredible. Did you know it takes like 3 years to just cultivate it?
Yeah, it does. It takes a long time, but some people, and the white asparagus is even more sought after.
I recently had black garlic.
Yeah.
and it was bitter and sweet. And you know what it reminded me of? It
What?
had the profile of black licorice,
Hmm.
except for it was garlic. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? How black licorice has that bitter sweetness to it.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess
Um,
that's a good. It's a good correlation.
well, and I think people should try different ingredients like black. I didn't even know black garlic existed. Do you have any stories for the listeners of ingredients you encountered that blew your mind because you didn't know that they even existed beforehand?
Um, I don't off top of my head. No, I don't. But
Like that
some.
Zestar apple we talked about?
Well, so I had heard about, because the Honey Crisp and then the Zestar came out. I wanted to know what the next one was going to be and the next one. So I did research and then I sought after them. But
It's like waiting for the next iPhone,
exactly, I
the
guess.
next Apple coming out.
Yep. Um, I don't know. There wasn't. I like to try new things. So and by new things, new was a different thing back then. There's not many things I haven't been able to cook with or try.
Do you
And
ever utilize pomegranates?
I like to eat pomegranates.
Don't they have the highest sugar content in nature?
I don't.
Natural sugar content. I think I mentioned that last time in a podcast,
Maybe.
but
Maybe.
I've never been able to utilize them in a dish. They always seem to be an ingredient for like a smoothie or a beverage.
I think I've used them. I know I have used them as like a garnish before, but I don't even remember what with.
So what are the staples? Like if you opened up a restaurant, what ingredients would you could not go without? You had to have on hand all the time.
I don't even know. I'd have to know what I wanted out of the restaurant. For one, you have to have salt.
Salt's one of the staples.
It's the key. It's where food came from. I would like to think. That's why we.
Why does salt enhance flavor? Like why is it always at the end of a recipe? You
To
always have to
taste.
taste.
Well, the thing about salt is it changes the profiles of everything. It changes the way something smells when it's cooking.
Would
It
you say it amplifies or fundamentally changes?
um it amplifies flavors of other things in the dish, but it changes everything at once. Does that
Wow.
make sense? So like if you're making a soup and you can only taste the chicken stock or like one ingredient. You just keep adding salt. And you might think it's a lot of salt at some point, but when you get it right, you know that it's there. And again, it changes the way that the smell rises into the air. It changes the boiling temperature of the water. It changes the freezing temperatures. It changes I mean, the reason you call it a salary nowadays is because back in the day, you would go get paid in salt at the salarium. That's how you made your money, or you used salt to preserve your food, to season your food,
Now, did
to.
salt come out of Mesopotamia? You think of like the Dead Sea and
You know what? I'm not sure. This is another thing. I don't think it came. I think it was way before that. I think it was the beginning of beginning, and everybody. Some
and
some
you
what?
can find salt in caves, right?
Yeah, you can find it percolating through the ground in a cave that makes beautiful upside down pyramid shapes of salt that are
Because
just.
at the end of the day, it's a crystal.
Yeah, absolutely. It's like a
And
stalagmite or a
would you
stalactite.
know offhand what temperature like salt breaks down? How much heat do you need to start breaking down the salt?
Well, if there's salt in a liquid, as long as there's enough temperature for that liquid to evaporate, the salt intensifies, right?
Okay. Okay.
So as long as there's a way to get rid of the liquid in the air, which would be, I don't even know what a good temp would be. Who knows? Depends where you're at or what the humidity in the air, all that, everything.
And what, you always think salt, but then on the other end you have sugar.
Mm-hmm.
Now, why is it that sugar is not as versatile as salt when it comes? You can put salt on almost anything, but yet you really can't put sugar on anything. And sugar will not interact with everything. It will not it will not change the flavors or bring flavors out unless it's compatible.
Sometimes it does, but actually sugar is sometimes used to dull other flavors because the sweetness actually can.
It's like a softener.
Yeah, we'll say that. Yeah, that's about right. I
If you
mean,
gave
but
it a
it does actually bring out some flavors sometimes.
Do
Excuse
you
me.
ever
But
use salt and sugar in the same dish?
most of the time every time you're cooking, you're using salt. So we'll say what I made for brunch this morning was a lemon glazed carrots. So I sautéed onions, threw in the carrots, sautéed those a little bit, threw in a little chicken stock, lemon juice, and seasoned it with salt. Not too much because you're reducing a liquid and that salt could intensify again. So you just a little salt at first, but you have to, and brown sugar. Sorry, did I say that?
No, and before you go on, what's the difference between brown sugar and white sugar?
Well, regular sugar is most of the time it's just regular sugar. Sorry, and then brown sugar as molasses is added.
All right.
But what you're doing in that dish for the glazed carrots is you're using the brown sugar to when everything starts to reduce, it starts to glaze the carrots. It starts to turn into a syrup with the other liquids that have reduced.
I see.
It's delicious.
And when you're doing like a zest, it's kind of funny. Is like a lemon. Was lemon the very first preservative for flavors?
I believe it was salt.
I mean, because it seems like when you want to, what is the word, freshen something up when you're cooking it or baking it, lemon will freshen anything up.
Maybe it's
Especially,
because it's fighting off scurvy.
but it's funny. Like when you make a zest out of a lemon, sugar is completely compatible with that, the acidic properties.
Right, and
But yeah,
actually it brings down acids, which is
exactly.
why you put some sugar in like a tomato sauce because it brings down the acidity level and brings up the flavor brings down the acidity, which actually brings up the flavor.
Yeah, speaking of sauces, I try to avoid ketchup. I know
should.
you don't like ketchup, but I see it as like the bastard sauce. It's overused. It's the commoner's sauce. Somebody who doesn't really engage in expanding the palate loves ketchup usually.
A lot of the times it's
I don't like it. I think ketchup, it's great with potatoes. I understand that. But ketchup with anything else is, I always feel like it takes over. It's too potent, especially
yeah.
these brands of like high syrup content and food coloring and tomato paste. I feel like it's too potent. It's not even,
and sugar when they
you
put so
cannot
much
enjoy
sugar.
it. And then I moved when I was younger to like trying out different ranches, even ranch with like pizza,
Mm-hmm.
And then eventually I got to the point where
No ranch.
no ranch. I like to enjoy, like, if the food is not that great, you add the sauce. I think sauce, unless it's a part of the dish or a visual aspect, you shouldn't try to cover up your flavors with sauce.
Yep.
And if your standalone product has the quality you're looking for, the consumer of that product will not go and grab the ketchup or the ranch.
Right. But you have to have mustard on your hot dog.
Oh, and mustard is amazing because it has what, like 0 calories?
Probably.
And it doesn't have any sugar. Like, it's one of the sauces you can go wild with and not feel bad.
Well, it's basically like a Tabasco sauce, just with different ingredients made in a different way.
And there's so many things you can do with mustard. It's like a base ingredient for a lot of things.
I do love mustards.
And what's the difference between a Dijon and a yellow mustard?
Well, a lot of times you use that mustard powder to make like a regular yellow mustard, I believe. Or the
Now, was yellow mustard the product of industrialization? Was that the first mustard? You would think like something like ground mustard was the first mustard.
I think the ground may have been the first mustards, but again, you can't quote me on this because I never looked into the hardcore mustard research.
You're not a mustard enthusiast?
No.
You're not part of the mustard club?
I know what kind of mustards I like, though, and that's almost all of them.
Fraternity of the mustard?
Yeah, we must start all the fraternities. I don't even know. I like mustard. Now, my mouth is literally watering from talking about different mustards. I can't even think straight. I want like a whole grain mustard right now.
Yeah, what is your favorite mustard? I like Dijon.
I like a it's basically like whole grain, but you Roboku it, which means you like put it in the food processor just a little bit, and then you add horseradish to it.
Ooh.
It's fresh horseradish. It's amazing. You can't go wrong.
You know what? Like a Thousand Island, like people talk about, because fast food restaurants, they want to cover up their base products, so they always try to give you a special sauce, right?
Yeah.
Is it true that the McDonald's Big Mac sauce is just like a Thousand Island with some ketchup?
Also known as Russian dressing, yes.
And Arby's. You ever had Arby's sauce?
Yep.
What is that? It's like a Tabasco. It's something like it's very distinct. Like when you bite into a Big Mac, you go, "No, that's a Thousand Island." But then when you put on some Arby's sauce, you're like, "What the hell is this? I don't know if it's natural. I don't know. Like, what is it?" That's the only sauce in the fast food market that I like. It's like an acquired.
It's pretty good stuff.
What's the steak sauce? A1.
Mm-hmm.
Not everybody likes A1, but once you get that distinct flavor of A1, you're not going to use many other steak sauces.
Right.
I feel that way about Arby's in the fast food sense.
Arby's sauce is pretty bomb.
And you know what else? A lot of listeners outside of the Midwest may not be familiar with this, but White Castle had a zesty zing sauce. And to this day, I don't know what it was, but it complemented their chips. And I just like it when, even though I just said, and this rings true for fast food, the only time you use a sauce is to cover up your shitty base product.
When that sauce complements the food, that's why it's there, though.
But exactly, I actually kind of like exploring the sauces fast food have for us to try, because sometimes they have some really strange combinations.
At the Arby's up here in Minnesota, when I grew up in Texas, they had like a 7 pepper Arby's sauce, or like spicy Arby's sauce. Did they have that here?
I am not familiar with a spicy Arby's sauce.
And it wasn't the horsey sauce. It was a spicy Arby's sauce. Dude, it was so good. It was like Arby's sauce with an extra like, so good.
Yeah, I think that you ever had a horseradish base with like you make your own cocktail sauce?
Oh yeah.
I love a perfect horseradish base for your cocktail sauce.
Yeah,
I
but you
like
have to have
that
a. I
zing
like a lot of. I love enough. It has to be enough horseradish to where you.
where it kind
feel
of hits the nose.
Yeah, it has to. You have to feel it in your nose.
Exactly. Like wasabi and horseradish. Are they cousins?
They are the same thing.
Like it's amazing.
Well, most of the wasabi around here you get is like that powdered shit, and real wasabi is hard to come by. But it is all a different type of radish or horseradish.
And is it true real wasabi, like it's a rare item?
I want to. Okay, so don't quote me again, but I want to say real wasabi is like grown underwater and like you have to
It's like a
find it.
seaweed, right?
Yeah, it has to be. You have to actually know where to find it. It's crazy. I don't know. I don't know again. Maybe I just read a little bit. I should know more, but I don't.
And one thing about the town I'm living in currently, we are dominated.
Way in the Midwest, in the deeps, in the bowels of the Midwest.
We are dominated by fast food, banks, and liquor stores. And I just wish the people around here had a palate because I there's nothing to eat. There's nothing fancy. There's no cuisine.
Well, a lot of the thing about suburbs or even cities is they capitalize where they can on that cheap food so they can get their dollars and then people can still get fed. But it's, again, it goes back to sustenance over relevance.
And I feel like anything above the Applebee's, which is really just Perkins with beer, a liquor license.
Yeah.
I hear they even source like the same steaks, except for Applebee's charges a little bit more because you're eating good in the neighborhood.
Most likely.
But whenever you see somebody try to break through with like a fancier upscale diner, they always go with Italian, right? Because you cannot fail. Like if you want to break into a suburb and be profitable right away, just offer them Italian food because it fills them up fast. The flavors are easy to enhance and get down, and you can jack the prices up and sell them liquor too.
Yeah, it's either pasta, which is flour, eggs, and water, or it's pizza, which is flour and water.
And I feel like the hardest thing to do when it comes to getting into the fine dining area is, I want to say Asian cuisine. Like that's the hardest thing to pull off when it comes to fine dining in the Midwest.
There's depending on what you say for Asian though. There's again,
because we're not by oceans, like a lot of Asian food goes around the fish.
Yeah. But it also goes around like the profiling of flavors.
Right.
But again, being in where we are now, we can get a lot of those ingredients. So, but it's all preparation. It's all technique. You have to know these techniques and they can't be just read out of a book. You have to really understand what you're doing to get the flavors that you're trying to get.
Could you touch on like properly prepared rice? Like people have this misconception of like the rice you get that's instant rice to even the rice that you have to sit down and wait to boil and get nice and tender. Talk about the properly prepared rice, the kind of rice that gets beaten by hand for hours.
Well, there's different preparations of rice, but the rice, okay, we'll say sushi rice, okay?
Yeah, giving it that binding quality.
So when you look at a quality sushi rice, you see that every grain is exactly the same looking. They all look the same. They're the same size. They're the same shape, same everything. And that's because the person that grew that, where they got that rice from was a quality way of growing, a quality. They checked over it the whole time. They didn't let it slip. But when you get this rice, when you get like Uncle Ben's or something, you look at that, and again, that's a genetically modified rice. That's a certain type of rice that's made easier now or par cooked, or it's a way of getting it to your plate faster, but that's not what it's for the sushi. So you get the thing about sushi rice is that's what sushi means, seasoned rice. You make you make the su, which is the vinegar, the water, and the salt, and then the shi is the rice.
And what's the other name for the other kind of what people just label sushi? There's a different name, like between
There's a lot of names.
There's like maki. What's maki?
Maki rolls or just rolls.
Okay.
It's like regular. And there's futomaki, which is like the rice with the fish laid over it. There's sashimi, which is just the meats.
That's the one I was looking for.
Yep. And then it gets even deeper where they call
these can be cooked or uncooked.
Well, the common misconception is a lot of it's raw.
Right. People think sushi and it covers everything.
Yeah, they think that sushi is... They don't even know that sushi doesn't even have anything to do with the meat. The word sushi has to do with the rice.
Now, is the rice prepared the same for all those variants that you just described, or is that only sushi?
Sushi.
Gotcha.
Different variants also use different types of rice too, and they're all depending on the quality you want to get.
And it's funny, I didn't even know that the ginger was to clear my palate until you pointed that out.
Yeah, the pickled ginger. So what you're supposed to do when you sit down at a sushi restaurant, they always give you a little wasabi. They always give you the soy sauce, and then they give you the ginger. So what you're supposed to do is you get a little hint of that ginger, you put some of that in your mouth, and it clears your palate. It clears out all the taste you may have had prior, and it starts over. So you get a basic flavor profile for your next bite.
And water does the same thing.
Water can do the same thing, but the more you can cleanse your palate, the better your next bite's going to be.
Right.
So you get a little of that ginger. A lot of people put the wasabi into the soy sauce.
Ooh.
Well, again, that in a lot of ways that's frowned upon because a lot of the times that soy sauce is like their wine or their beer.
You're contaminating.
You are, because they spent their time, because it's a brew. That's how you make a soy sauce, like a beer or a wine. It's a brew. I shouldn't say the wine part, but they've made it. They spent time to make that. So you want to taste a little bit of their soy sauce flavor too, because hopefully it will complement that piece of sushi. And a lot of the times when you get sushi, there's a little bit of wasabi in there just to give you a little bit more depth of profile.
See, personally, I like to dip the rice and kind of give it a nice little layer of the soy.
Yep.
And then I top my bite off with the wasabi. I never try to contaminate the soy with the wasabi.
Right. Well, see, what I always do is I always get 2 or 3 of the same thing. So I always try it with a little soy first, and then after that, when I try the next bite of the same thing, then I know whether it needs a little bit more of this or that.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Yeah, because, going back to Uncle Tom's rice.
Ben.
Oh. Well.
Wow, that was
It was a Freudian slip.
That we're talking about Uncle Ben and his terrible rice. Well, it's good for some things.
Well, that kind of rice, like when I go and get like wild grain rice, I try to get like the Minnesota brand. I forget the actual name, but it's sourced here from Minnesota from whole grain.
Are you talking about wild rice? A lot of people don't even know what wild rice is.
Yeah, and wild rice actually thrives in the Midwest.
Right. Because it has so much good water.
And what would you say about wild rice versus prepared rice, the white rice?
Wild rice is so meaty. And it's almost like so if you're eating a button mushroom and then you try some like hen of the wood mushroom, which is also called a maitake.
That's what's funny about mushrooms. It's like a substitute for meat, but go on.
But it does, and this goes back to the rice. It gets meaty. It's just got this different base profile of just having so much earth to it that it tastes like meat.
Even the look of it.
Yeah, it's so dark and long
Wild.
and wild, plentiful beautifulness. Isn't there a wild rice in your basically your backyard, your pond in the back?
Yeah. Except for I don't think we ever harvest it. And you know what is that
I've learned
business
how to.
practice of growing being a rice paddy farmer?
Well, that's a little different than the way we would do it in the Midwest, but
Now, what's the difference between that? Because that's constantly on water, like cranberries.
well, those are. It's like a hydro. I don't necessarily know because they're both grown in water. Okay, but one's a much longer, stronger, which is the wild rice, um, plant, and the other one is definitely regulated a lot more. What they call wild rice is it can grow wild. Like they don't necessarily have to plant it like the other rice has
Like
to be.
wild rhubarb.
Yeah, and the difference is you pick it by the regular rice is you plant it and you know where it's growing and all this. On the wild rice, you have to go in a boat, and every time you go by a wild rice plant that's growing, basically what you do is you hit it from it growing on the outside, you hit it and make the rice fall into the inside of your boat, and then that makes the rice fall off, and then you can harvest it.
Wow. No, that's amazing because a lot of these foods we could grow ourselves. Like if we ever have to go back to that, um, people just need to know, like you say, where their food comes from,
Yeah, I mean,
and not only where it comes from, but how to grow it. It's
even if you do it once a week, what's your favorite food you had that week? Your favorite vegetable or something like that? Just look it up. See how easy it is to grow it and try growing it.
well, and people always say like, I don't have land for that, man. Well, the truth is, you can buy these things called pots, and you can put soil in the pot and grow a few fruits and vegetables.
Some of the easiest things to do are little hydroponic kits or like a
Right, or
upside down, yeah,
hanging gardens.
upside, yeah, like hanging gardens, upside down tomato kits, or you just
And
it's a whole different, like I think we've said this before and covered it, but it's a whole different thing when you from the planting of the seed to the harvesting and then cutting it and then eating it for your dinner. It's a whole different feeling and texture, or a whole different, I don't even, a whole psychologically, it's everything's different about that plant that you're eating rather than the one you just ordered to your, or picked up from the grocery store.
well, when there's a famine, they always say to grow potatoes.
Mm-hmm.
That's because a lot of potatoes, they can even grow in sand. Isn't
Yep.
that amazing? Um,
Mm-hmm.
and right now, just to cover for the listeners what we're growing at the Ether Hawkins farm, I have a sucroy tomato,
Mm.
and I also have red cherry tomatoes. Both plants are around 4 to 6 feet in height once they are fully grown. And I have little tomato cages finally around them. And then in a different plot of land, we have a third strain of tomatoes growing, the more traditional, I forget the name, it's just the traditional fat red tomato. And we also have a little bit of squash, cucumbers. I always have to have cucumbers because even if you neglect to harvest them for the cukes, you can turn them into pickles.
Oh, beautiful little pickles.
And we have watermelon again. We're attempting to grow. Last time we grew watermelon, the deer, they ate the flowers.
They love that shit.
Oh, definitely. They will eat every flower from our cucumbers to all the low lying vine plants. They
Can
love
I
to take the flowers off.
Can I go over what I'm growing at the Auditory Osmosis studio and whatever's taking them off of my plants? I want to know what's going on.
You can. I just wanted to touch on. We also have a few onions, some sunflowers, and I believe we have a few potatoes. We tried corn, but we're not fans of corn. So go on. Sorry.
Corn's a difficult one. Well, I was just saying that somebody's taking out of my plants at the Auditory Osmosis Studios.
Well, and I'm not going to say I am, or because I don't want to self-incriminate myself, but I may know perhaps who is involved in taking from the the studio garden here.
The tomatoes are delicious, but it's the other things that I'm talking about. I don't understand. I don't appreciate it. If anybody that works here at the studios is listening.
Well, I just think if I can.
This studio is so dirty right now. What is going on? Who's eating all these potato chips?
Well, like I said, man, we're going to have to clean up a little bit. I mean, when's your next day off?
Don't even talk about it. It's my first day off in like 58 days or something.
So now you actually do have a day off.
I do have a day off. I can't wait. It's going to be amazing.
Which day is that?
It's this Tuesday, dude. It's going to be awesome.
Well, how do you feel about coming in and just cleaning up the studio on your day off? I'm not saying you'd have to stay here all day, but just put in the extra effort and maybe 8 hours, clean it up a little. I'm going to be doing important stuff. I'm going to be making notes, tracking news. I'm a news junkie, you know that. But this studio is a mess, and I think perhaps it could be a cordial duty.
My side of the studio is spotless, except for the leaves falling off my plants because something keeps raiding them.
Well, when I look at the floor, if you notice, it's really not definitive to where your side starts and my side starts.
It's because of all the spilled potato chips, and somebody keeps tracking them everywhere.
I like to think of the studio as a commune, right, Mr. Ritter? So I think it's your turn to help out and clean up the commune. I mean, I do enough here.
It's my one day off, and you want me to...
You got to utilize it. The body was meant to work. And if you're not moving, what's a day? You have to be on your feet. You're designed to be on your feet. I mean, for how many months have you been on your feet?
All of them. No, 6? No, 6 weeks. So
don't you think you might go into a state of shock if you have too much rest, too much free time?
It's probably true.
That's all I'm getting at. I
don't like that feeling of sleeping for 14 hours on my first day off in 50 some days.
Well, let's just ignore how many days. It's a relative number, but let's just make sure that you get in here on Tuesday, bright and early, and clean up the mess because, the studio is our temple, right?
I don't even eat potato chips. I don't put those into my temple.
Well, I don't try to spill. It's just I sometimes am a messy eater. For instance, right now I have cookie crumbs.
The cookies. Yeah, they're everywhere.
Crumbs are on my lap. And at the end of the show, I'm going to stand up. And you know where the cookie crumbs go? On the floor. So you can see this is a cycle of madness.
Is this something I have to clean up on Tuesday?
I'm not, it's totally up to you. But I think it's a healthy task. And I don't think I'm asking for much. Just a little extra effort on your part. Just get in here. Maybe, do some scrubbing. You ever scrub a floor?
Cinderella.
Well, we're not gonna make you wear a dress.
That's what you say every time.
The point is the studio needs cleaning. You have a day off. I'm always busy. And let's just leave it at that. No arguing. Not on air. The listeners don't want to hear it.
You watch plants grow.
I watch plants grow, and I report on the plants growing.
Because you can't just call everything time lapse, okay?
Well, it's a cycle. It's a circle, as you know. And I want you to be at the end of this messy circle, and I want you to make the circle clean.
Wait. Does that mean I'm part of a Venn diagram of two circles? Or is it like a one circle with an ending point, which would be radius times pi?
Let me make this simple.
I don't.
Here I am. Here you are. Here's the circle. This is the area that you have to clean up.
You know, I
Think
can't.
about that.
I can't see everything from here. Can you just hand that over? All right. It's a really big circle. And I'm not inside the circle.
And I know sometimes you need illustrations.
Well, yeah, but I'm not inside the circle. And then that's the point. It says auditory osmosis. There's a big circle, and I'm way outside of the circle. I don't understand. Redraw it.
Well, I'll cut. All right. How about this? A written agreement.
Oh, God. Is this about Tuesday?
I, Ether Hawkins, will stop rating Mr. Ritter's studio garden. Scratch that.
Yeah, because you have to get rid of those quotations.
Community garden. It's not a studio. It's not your garden. It's community garden. What was I thinking?
But
If
I thought that was
this
my,
is the stipulation,
my garden.
if
You said I could play
come
the music at a reasonable volume.
if you come in Tuesday for 8 hours
Mm.
of cleaning,
But
sign it. Sign it.
no, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to sign this document. I don't believe that I should sign it. There's a couple zeros at the bottom again.
Well, I'm not gonna, stop rating the community garden.
I'm your chef / slave, and I like to call myself the jester too, but
It's not the terminology in the contract.
well, there's an arrow. It says flip over here.
Yeah, read that.
Um,
What do you think about that?
Still, I want to go back to this community garden part first and foremost. I don't believe it. It's my garden.
Well, we got off topic.
We did.
And I apologize. Getting back to food. But you are going to come in Tuesday, right?
Here you go.
And food is just incredible. And I'm glad episode 11, we focused in on a theme and we really started to just dig around. It was like a verbal dig, We were archaeologists of ideas and we were just digging around.
I think I could do food for forever.
Food for days, man.
For days.
We should do a marathon.
A
of just
food marathon?
Live from the Minnesota State Fair.
Let's go.
What do you think about a stand at the Minnesota State Fair, curry and curds, with a little dinner theater?
I'll
fry the curds. You do the curry.
Could we bring it to like Golden State and do the Stefan Curry's fried curds?
That's a thing.
I think we could make it a thing.
I mean, what is that? What does that even taste like? Is it curds in the curry?
Probably delicious.
Huh. Because I was just thinking two separate things. You got the pretentious people asking for the curry, and then you have the state fair goers asking for the curds.
You've been in Britain too long with the curries.
Well, all I'm saying is curries and curds, the CCs of the state fair, man.
Or the KKs.
The KKs, the Colonel. I don't even know what are some foods that start with K.
Corn is in the band.
Kit Kats. How about Colonels and Kit
Kats.
Kats?
No, let's not do that.
That'd be disgusting.
Yeah. What about ketchup? No, that's terrible too.
What's up with the catsup and the ketchup?
I call it cat soup.
Cat soup. I like that.
Well, I don't like it.
And then the cat soup.
Cats are weird. Yeah. Most people love that ketchup shit. We've already talked about that. I don't even want to get on fucking ketchup again. Can we just get rid of it?
Yeah, you were drifting towards the cat conversation.
Yeah,
why do people say?
And then I got angry that I was angry. Okay, you want me to come in here on my day off? Sorry.
Well,
Sorry.
It's not like I'm forcing you to do anything, and but you are coming. You're coming in Tuesday, right? Like,
yeah,
that's an agreement, right? You did.
I'll fucking be here.
Okay, and it's not like I forced you to do anything. I'm just trying to have you give a little back to the community, which happens to be the studio. This is a commune, man. This is where we share our artistic experience.
Yeah, you're right.
And it's really sad that why do people always have the racial stigma of Asians cooking cats? What's up with that?
Well, actually, they use more dog than cat.
Yeah, and why do people in the West like to always say, like, is there any truth? Like, if we have to end this food podcast on a kind of crazy note, can we find any truth to those sayings? Like, when did that start? Did they actually ever cook wild dog and cat?
Well, think about it. How fast do dogs and cats multiply?
Very fast.
And if you're hungry, what are you going to eat?
Probably rats, though, because
probably anything you can get your hands on.
That's true.
Rats are harder to get than a cat or a dog because they'll come to you if you have something in your hand sometimes. Or most.
Well, in the West, the dog is a man's best friend. And in the East, the dog is just an ingredient.
Maybe an ingredient to a fun life.
And here's one more thing. I don't understand. Like, the West has just a lot of misconceptions. Like, in The Simpsons, why are they yellow but their eyes are normal?
I don't like that topic.
It keeps me up at night.
Certain things. What about the? I don't even want to go there. How about I give you a joke?
All right.
How do you get a baby to stop crawling in circles?
No, this is going to be violent. How, Mr. Ritter?
You nail its other hand to the floor.
Oh!
Yeah, it's probably pretty too much. Probably too much of a... We shouldn't tell...
Yeah, but wouldn't he become like a pinwheel going around the nail with his hand? But, I see what you mean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you call... What's the difference between a bucket of dead babies and a Z06 Corvette?
Now you're just creeping me out.
Yeah. What's the difference?
What's the difference? You tell me.
I have one of them in our studio garage right now.
Yeah, and unfortunately, I know the answer.
What? That was a fake baby. I should never tell baby jokes again.
I mean, that's your prerogative, but all I'm saying is you better be here Tuesday.
Oh, at the studio Tuesday.
You know what I'm excited for? UFC 200.
Oh, dude, I can't wait.
I mean, is this going down? Are we
getting on something really good? We're doing this. I think we're gonna do it at the studio.
I think so too. And are we going to be able to do a live broadcast?
I think so. I think we can do something like that.
I mean, we're gonna have that worked out because UFC 200 is going to be big. I heard that the cards are subject to change. Do they always say that just
They're
to cover
always
their ass?
always subject to change because
Somebody might die.
well, you're training every day for this fight too, so shit can
That's
happen.
true. Any updates, by the way, with UFC 200? Something for the listeners, like any of the cards actually changed? Did we find out about any of the...
No cards have changed yet. I haven't heard anything about injuries or any less or more hype.
What about the performance-enhancing drug test for Mr. Lesnar?
He's been he doesn't have to take it or something along those lines.
So they're still sticking to that? He's
basically
free to go?
Yeah, Mark Hunt's pretty pissed off about it, but
I would be too, man.
Yeah, he's going to fight regardless.
Yeah, and I was thinking about going back to the state fair when I was talking about, tongue-in-cheek stand with cheese, curds, and curry. We should go to the state fair and report.
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. And you know what else is going on around these parts? One of the local baseball teams, they're engaging in an 1860s style baseball game. I thought it would be a lot of fun to, once we get some video going on with our studio here, we can start doing some live journalism and some human interest stories, perhaps.
Ooh, little publications here and there.
Yeah, not necessarily gonzo, like just real journalism at quirky human interest events.
We're gonna start evolving here soon, I believe. I feel
like we're learning how to crawl.
Yeah, we're crawling right now. We're not we may not be great at it, but soon we're gonna be sprinting.
Yeah, we're gonna have bionic legs, and I'm gonna shoot my girlfriend with a weapon through the door, and she's gonna die in the bathroom, and then I'm gonna be taken to trial and try to leave South Africa. And I guess I'm not Oscar Petraeus. But
that's not your story at all.
No. I have to live my own story and stop living other stories.
All right, brother, we got to get out of here. We
do, but Tuesday.
We only paid for electricity for like 3 more minutes.
Tuesday,
I'll be there, or I'll be here. I'm sorry.
And don't waste electricity. Like, if you can, bring like a shark vac that runs off of batteries. Like, come on, man. Don't turn on the lights. Don't waste energy.
I got that.
Get in, get out.
I got that new backpack one.
Good. All right.
Yeah, excellent. It's gonna be fine.
And if you do a good job, we can make this like a weekly routine for you.
No,
I'm just kidding. But you really will. You'll be here Tuesday. No, like, I'm counting on you.
I mean, yes. I'll be there Tuesday. Here Tuesday.
All right, man. Well, I'm gonna pack up, and I might stick around to water the plants here.
You should probably water the plants, and there's still another cookie right there. You should probably have that too.
Oh, you don't have to tell me.
Yep.
I'm well aware of the cookie over there.
All right, brother. I'm out of here. I've got to drive.
Well, folks, this has been episode 11 of Auditory Osmosis. I'm one of your hosts, Ether Hawkins, and this is my partner, Nicholas Ritter.
Ritter.
Signing out.
Peace from the Midwest of the East. Or not.